Our chosen domain, that is the pursuit of happiness. That is your consciousness applied to reality. That is you taking ownership of your life. And something game-changingly new, that is rejecting the traditional best practices of the entrenched bureaucracy if they don't work for you in your circumstances, and creating something that you find to be exhilarating or amazing or generates happiness or pride. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this podcast of the Moneyball Method. My name is Mark Shupe. I am the author of the book, The Moneyball Method, a Middle-Class Manifesto for Objective Investing. If you were able to view the last podcast, you'll know that I concluded the fourth of four in a series about the book Abundance, and my conclusion said something that I believe to be powerful and relevant to many subjects in our socioeconomic culture today. And that is, what is the enemy of communism? What is the enemy of socialism? What is the enemy of all forms of political systems that are collectivist? The enemy is money and the mind. And yet the book Abundance had embraced massive amounts of free electricity and massive amounts of money to fund that free electricity for free housing, free transportation, free medical care for everyone. But they realized something. They realized that the environmental lobby that had crippled construction of all of these projects with environmental protection legislation and environmental impact studies was preventing them from achieving their communist utopia. In fact, they had to embrace money and the mind in order to realize their communist utopia. And they had to do that by recognizing the reality of electricity, of power that is needed to mine cryptocurrency, meaning money, as well as to manufacture facilities for artificial intelligence, meaning the mind. So all of a sudden, the money and the mind are now assets or partners in this dream toward a communist utopia. This is a big change of heart of thinking in the minds of the collectivists, socialists, communists, whatever you want to call them. But what can we do about it? Well, like any change in our socioeconomic system, it starts with the individual. It starts with us. It starts with you. It starts with me. So I'd like to continue the conversation about money and the mind in the context of financial independence, and in particular, financial independence in the context of the Moneyball Method. That's why we're here. That's important because my goal is to make sure that we direct our conversation to things that are possible in the reality of your own life. And that's where it begins. So the purpose of my talk today is to answer the question, financial independence, what does that mean? I argue that it's a commonly used term that most people do not understand. It's vague, it's ambiguous. But in order to understand and appreciate this in the context of your life as an investor, as an individual with goals and aspirations, we need to break it up into its two component parts, meaning money and the mind. Money is obviously related to the financial aspect of financial independence, and the mind is related to independence. And I don't mean political independence, but ethical independence, the virtue of independence. Before getting into that, let's talk about some common conceptions that many people believe to be true and they live by regarding money and financial independence. These four quotes were taken from a book that was published earlier this year, and it was published by a registered financial advisor. The title of the book was Financial Abundance, oddly enough. And 47 people were interviewed for this book, and I selected four quotes that I think are representative of common conceptions regarding money and financial independence in our culture today. The first one, money provides security for the future. Money provides a comfortable lifestyle. Yes, it does. However, it doesn't really discuss the nature of money or the cause of wealth. I'm not sure that the author of the book or the people that answered the questions in the interviews really understand the nature of money. The second one, I think money provides freedom to travel, to drive the kind of car I want, live where I want, not be a burden on anyone as I age. That is true, and that is important. And the last part, not be a burden, implies independence. So now we're getting somewhere. But still, we're not talking about the nature of money or its purpose other than to help you acquire the goods and services that you need and that you enjoy. The third one, now we're getting a little closer again. Money is not static. It depends on where it flows. Absolutely. It can create pathways for impact. I like to realign into good things that provide opportunities for helping people. This started off strong. Money flows to talent, as you've heard me say many times in this podcast. And money by itself does nothing. It has no intrinsic value. You can't eat it. You can't sleep under it. You can't travel in it. But money does need to flow, and it needs to flow to its most efficient use. However, this individual believes in the common conception of self-sacrifice for the common good, opportunities for helping people. Certainly, but that is a secondary effect. We need to help ourselves first. We need to take ownership of our own lives, our own futures, our own destiny, our own values, goals, and aspirations. Lastly, money is a means to an end. Yes, it is. Money is a tool. It does not replace you as a driver. You determine what those ends are. And money is a tool to help you get there through voluntary trade, negotiation, free of the initiation of force. Money is about adding value, or money creation happens when there is value creation. So let's talk about independence. Most people think of it in terms of political independence, particularly with regard to America's Declaration of Independence. It begins, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, they're not really self-evident. It took thousands of years before America's founding fathers and the philosophers that immediately preceded them to understand the concept of political independence. It was radical. It was new. It changed the world. To America's founders, it seemed self-evident because they had been able to prove it after centuries of study, evaluation, reason applied to reality. All men are created equal. Is that true? We're all born with different physical attributes, intellectual attributes, into different family structures, economic situations, ethnic groups, nationalities, whatever the case may be. What do they mean by created equal? I'll get to that. Endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. This is a nod to the primacy of existence. Existence exists. Regardless of what you think about it, it exists, and everything in existence has an identity. For human beings, the primary identity is consciousness. So these truths include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness is different for everyone. It depends on your values, your goals, your aspirations, your age, your life expectancy, your health. But nonetheless, it is a function of your consciousness. So let's summarize the Declaration of Independence. The founders start by saying existence exists. It is a nod to the fact that we must obey reality before we can command it. Created equal. It's about individual sovereignty, taking ownership of your own life, your life as the highest value, to be a rational individual in pursuit of your own self-interests while respecting the rights of others. Endowed. We are endowed with the attribute of reason. Reason is an absolute. It is necessary in order to survive. If we all didn't apply reason in the rules of logic to our lives on a daily basis, at least to a certain degree, some of the time, we would die. And that is where rights come from. They are a moral principle derived by reason applied to reality. That is political independence. But it also leads to ethical independence. And one of the best ways to understand ethical independence is another preamble, this time to the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things that I can. That is the Moneyball method. And the wisdom to know the difference. This is what I hope to help people understand and use for their benefit. But let's take that apart. Ethical independence in the context of the serenity prayer. Reinhold Niebuhr was the author of this. He is saying that serenity is a nod to the primacy of existence. Existence exists. We cannot change it. It has no opinion about your health, happiness, or prosperity. Courage. This is principled action. What are the principles that we want to adopt and the actions that we will take based on those principles? Wisdom. This is a nod to reason and logic. So there's a lot in common with the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, the preamble to the Serenity Prayer, as well as the Moneyball Method. Here is a quote from my book, and I'm actually quoting Michael Lewis from his book, Moneyball, The Art of Winning an Unfair Game. And he's talking about Billy Beane, the general manager of the Oakland Athletics. Beane needed to reject Major League Baseball's traditional methods. That took courage. He needed to find a reliable way to judge cheap talent. That took wisdom. He had to do it under ridicule from the baseball press. That required the serenity of understanding the nature of his surroundings and circumstances and the confidence to do it with reason and logic. I'm going to switch gears a little bit now, and instead of talking about ethical independence, I want to talk about money, the other side of the financial independence phrase. What is money? It has many attributes, as does independence. Number one, it is a unit of account. Every bookkeeping system in America and around the world uses some form of currency to keep track of assets, liabilities, revenue, expenses, profit, shareholder equity, whatever the case may be. It's important to be able to keep track and to measure things. It is a store of value. Money transcends time and space, if it's a sound form of money. And in order to be a reliable store of value, it has to be stable. It has to hold its value over time and across distances. For example, Bitcoin is not a good form of money. It is very volatile. All cryptocurrencies are volatile and really not good forms of money. I'm not sure they ever will be, because number three, they are not a great medium of exchange. And this is critical. Money is only as good as what you can convert it into. We don't actually trade money. We don't trade goods and services with money. We trade goods and services with goods and services that the money will buy. Money is just a way of keeping track of value, of measuring value for those transactions. But most importantly, to the Moneyball method is the wealth creation process. Money is the legacy of productive minds. In order to appreciate the independence and respect that money deserves, we have to understand how it is created. Money and the mind are two sides of the same coin. Wealth is created by ideas applied to reality. Money is a function of thinking and effort. Money is the legacy of productive minds. It could be yours. It could be someone you work with. It could be a customer. It doesn't matter. Once we understand that money in circulation, the only money supply that matters, is the legacy of somebody's productive effort, their virtues. Now I want to switch gears again to your financial independence. How do we achieve that? Something a little better than the superficial definitions that were given under the common conceptions portion of my talk. Here's another quote from Moneyball, the book by Michael Lewis. Years later, he would say that he'd never do something just for the money ever again, talking about Billy Beane, general manager of the Oakland A's. Now he was running a professional baseball team, His job was almost entirely about money, where to find it, how to spend it, whom to spend it on. Billy Beane had an epiphany about the nature of money and its purpose. Hopefully, you will have an epiphany about the nature of money and its purpose after watching this presentation today. But let's talk a little bit more about goals and objectives. Let's break those down into their two component parts. The goal is something that must be acted upon. It is a concrete. It is something that we can measure. It is something that we can define. That's a little bit different than objectives. Objectives are the material or the emotional values that are attached to that goal. How do you feel? How does this add value, purpose, or meaning to your life? The goals are a little more tangible. The objectives are more abstract. Objectives answer the question of value to whom and for what. In order for anything to be of value, there must be a human consciousness, your mind, that perceives the value and the benefit in terms of your life. It could be material goods, it could be experiences, it could be relationships. All of these are important, and all of them are integrated into the Moneyball method. Here I want to quote Gina Gorlin, a clinical psychologist and psychology professor. She is part of chapter 8 of my book. Getting down to the fundamentals of a domain or discipline is really hard. This is the hard part of the Moneyball method. The rest is easy. But it is the kind of thinking we need to do within our chosen domain if we want to conceive and create something game-changingly new. Our chosen domain, that is the pursuit of happiness. That is your consciousness applied to reality. That is you taking ownership of your life. And something game-changingly new, that is rejecting the traditional best practices of the entrenched bureaucracy if they don't work for you in your circumstances, and creating something that you find to be exhilarating or amazing or generates happiness or pride. And the 4 value domains that are present in my book, and I'd also like to thank Tal Tesfani and his book, Secrets of a Passionate Life, for defining these value domains. First, family and relationships. We all have them. They are exceedingly important. Business and career. We all have had one if we're retired now, or we will be having one if we're still young and in school and educating ourselves. At least that's necessary in order to be independent, to not be a parasite on the productive virtues of someone else. Health and fitness. Clearly, our health is essential to everything else, and it does require some financial independence to be able to maintain your health, your vitality, your longevity, your ability to think and act rationally. And then there's wealth building. This is a little bit different. This is what we do with the resources that we've accumulated, the wealth that we've created that has not yet been consumed, or it could be running a business, which transcends a job with a salary and benefits. What I do with the Moneyball method is then concretize all of that with the use of this tool. I call it the sitemap. Much like an internet website needs to have a chart as to how every aspect of that website is connected to others. And in the Moneyball method, I say, we will choose a path that's clear, and that begins with the values and aspirations that give meaning and purpose to your life. The 4 circles in yellow that you see, those are the 4 value domains. Those are 4 broad categories that help us get the conversation started, that lead to the process of introspection, that help us identify the things that are important and how they work together. And that's where the blue circles come in. This is a generic list. It is not complete with regard to you and what you find to be important, but it's a great place to start. What are the various categories that I need to think about? Which ones apply to me? What are the specifics regarding those values, those categories, those things that are important and as a whole working together are the blueprint of my life as it stands right now? Or more importantly, how you would like your life to look as you are the one that has control over that, either explicitly or not. And then there's the subject of work-life balance. Again, I quote Gina Gorlin, the builder honestly faces those costs and asks, is it worth it? But is it worth it on what standard? The standard, again, is your life as a whole. I would argue that the work-life balance is not healthy. There should be no conflict between the work and life categories. We want to integrate all of those into your life as a whole. Your mind and body is your life as a whole. Reason and emotions work together. They are integrated. And what we do is the same thing with the sitemap. House and home, professional and charitable, arts and entertainment, recreation and sports, travel and vacation. How do they work together? They do impact each other. And what we need to do is try to create a values hierarchy to understand the best way to integrate those. And with regard to the Moneyball method and financial independence, integrate those with the uncertainty of the future, particularly the uncertainty of capital market performance. That is another principle that makes the Moneyball method unique among anything you have ever read or heard about financial planning, investment management, personal finance. And it begins with introspection. And here I quote philosopher and novelist Ayn Rand. If men identified introspectively their inner states 1/10 as correctly as they identify objective reality, we would be a race of ideal giants. What is she talking about here? She's talking about the way things could and should be, not the way things are. People avoid introspection. It's difficult. It's sometimes tough to face the reality of anxieties and stress that are caused by you or by poor decisions or by people you care about, whatever the case may be. But with regard to goals, values, and aspirations, try to understand, what are we doing? How does it make us feel? Is it healthy? Do I need to keep it? Do I need to replace it? So let's start concluding this conversation about financial independence. What I've tried to do is establish the nature of independence, why it is important, how we should think about it, and then also establish the independence of money, the virtues of wealth creation, and how that works with independence. Money's reputation needs to be resurrected from the way it is demonized and debased in our culture today. It starts with us individually. Our healthy respect for money is essential in order to achieve financial independence, the kind that I've described here. And it starts with principles. What are your rationally chosen values? That's where the sitemap comes in. And you'll find a table on chapter 8. In the left column is principles. There are 6 of them. Please take a look. And then there are the propositions. What ideas are needed to help put those principles into action? That's value-driven action. This is values-driven investing. This is goals-based investing. That is the Moneyball method. Just like Billy Beane had a goal. He had to win games. Why? To sell tickets. Why? To earn a profit for his owners. That makes for a lot of happy fans, a lot of happy baseball players, a lot of happy owners. It's a positive feedback loop that starts with your own rational self-interest and the justice of earned profit. But specifically, what are the actions we're going to take? Those are the procedures of the Moneyball method. And the goal is to perform according to the benchmark that matters, and that is your life as an investor. Our benchmark is forward-looking. It's based on dollars of future wealth. It is dollar-weighted performance, not the traditional best practices of backward-looking, time-weighted performance that uses percent returns. Ultimately, it's about being able to answer the question, to make money for what? And that is the entrepreneurial mindset. That's what we would want to help you adopt for yourself with regarding to your cash flow and investment strategy decisions. Quoting from my book, with long-term vision, learning from experience, taking calculated risks, the objective investor adopts the low time preference of greater future rewards. In baseball and in sports, the Moneyball method is about statistical analysis, risk management, and measuring performance looking forward. The same is true with the Moneyball method and financial independence. We use statistical analysis, in other words, the objective evidence of reality. We learn from experience, meaning we gain the wisdom to know the difference between reality and the uncertainty of the future. And we measure performance. That gives us confidence. That gives us serenity. That is your financial independence. And with that, I'd like to wrap up. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll continue this conversation next week. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.